Just because it's shiny doesn't mean it's solid. Let's talk about how to tell if a flip is sexy or sketchy. Today we're talking with Brent Sinn, 512 Realty, a real estate investor and flipper. Thanks for being on, Brent.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about how you got into flipping.
Yeah, so I've always enjoyed real estate. My dad grew up, or I grew up with my dad fixing his houses that he bought and resold. And I got a job in the corporate world. I was like, oh, that's fun. And then I kind of accidentally became a landlord, where I had a condo. I moved in with my wife and I rented out my condo. And that really kind of got me interested in real estate. So I got to start fixing houses, and I slowly went from there to purchasing whole houses, fixing them up, and then selling them.
Nice. So, and I think that you've been really enjoying the work because isn't it right that at some point you turned the hobby into the day job and quit the day job?
That's correct. So I've been doing that for 2 or 3 years now. And as of this year, I've quit my job full time. So now I'm doing this full time.
Well, I'm really excited that you're joining us today because I'm really interested to get some of your thoughts and opinions on, how to spot a bad flip, right? Like what kinds of things, and when I'm walking through a flip with some buyers, I know what I'm looking for, but I'm excited to hear more about like what kinds of things are you looking for? Like tell me about some big red flags.
Yeah, that's really key because as a home buyer, you walk into a house, you get really excited, right? But then there's always some clues that you can look for to see if the job was done right to begin with. I think maybe the first thing any home buyer should be thinking about is like when you walk into the house, is that the house you want, right? Because that's going to give you the first impression. And from there, you can kind of start looking into other things. The two, maybe three areas that I really like to look for is the kitchen, right? Like how good is the kitchen set up? I think one of the tricks you can do is like open not just like the cupboard doors, but like open them all. Like do they run into walls? Do they only like open halfway because they weren't like put in right? And like maybe it's a corner cabinet, right? And they just didn't think about it, but nobody opens that cabinet.
Oh my gosh, that's a great tip because there are times that if we had not opened everything up, you would not notice things like a refrigerator that actually can't open up all the way. Or we were in a place not too long ago where we opened the oven and the oven actually couldn't open all the way because it ran into the fridge. And so, yeah, I'm going to start doing this. Like, I like this idea, like open everything.
Yep. I'm a very analytical person, so I definitely I go through all the checklists.
I'm usually opening them and then like seeing if they're soft close. I want to see if they slam. I'm opening the drawers and seeing if they have the soft close.
The other key thing that I really like to look at is paint lines. Specifically like the ceiling and wall right where they meet. Like, is that a nice clean paint line or does it wiggle around a whole lot?
And the trim, down the trim and along the baseboards.
Yep. And that's the next piece. I specifically will look at like trim that's like in a corner where someone doesn't see, but I'll like check the backside, right? So a painter should be hitting that up. But if from like just a person perspective, you might not see that. So that's the other area that I really like to look at.
Well, and as a buyer, like you said, they're excited. They're excited to look all around the house. And usually I'm the one that's kind of catching the details and saying, oh, do you notice that? Do you see that? And I actually just did a video about this not too long ago about this whole paint thing because people think that painting is easy and it feels like a place where, especially as they're getting ready to sell a house, it feels like a place where they could maybe save some money and freshen it up, make it nicer, right? But the truth is, like, if you're not a professional painter and you're not going to be taping everything off and making sure that all those lines are clean, it's going to end up looking DIY, and that actually ends up hurting you more than helping you, in my opinion.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And if you kind of think about the paint job is like the face of the project. So like if they are shorting money on the paint, like there's a good chance other areas they're kind of missing as well. So I think the paint job, while insignificant, is a good indicator of a lot of other things.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think there's other things like that too, where like if you see XYZ, then, then you're just wondering like what else is back there that you can't see. Because on a flip project, I think you guys usually like you're buying something that is distressed, right? Something very rundown, something that needs a full renovation, right? Um, and so once you get it all shiny and new, you've covered up a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories about like stuff that you've seen or that that sometimes gets covered up in a bad flip?
I'll have to think about some examples on that, but kind of along those same lines. Flippers are usually flipping or changing a good majority of this stuff. So one of the things that I would be looking at from a home buyer's perspective is, did they take the time to make a change that maybe was really easy in the moment? For example, like a flipper is going to be retexturing walls, repainting it, right? Which is, they're going to be doing that throughout generally. So did they like change up a door that was like kind of awkward? Did they take that opportunity where the drywall was already going to be torn up and maybe switched it from a pocket door to a regular door? Or is the basement just like completely clean, right? Just wall to wall carpet and nothing else in there? Or did they like take that little extra time to make it a little bit more usable, to really kind of bring out the concept a little bit, make it more usable? Or did they just like, paint and retexture?
Did they just slap lipstick on the pig?
Exactly. Exactly.
What about so you mentioned this earlier about does the kitchen layout make sense? Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I know I've heard this thing about like this triangle
Mhm.
layout. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the big natural things doesn't make sense to you. The piece, a couple things that I really like to
Mhm.
do. If I'm standing at the sink, I like the dishwasher to be able to open up. There are many, maybe rental units that I've gone into where you're at the sink and like the dishwasher like opens up into you. So you have to like step away, right? It should flow naturally
Mhm.
from the sink, being able to put stuff into the dishwasher. And when you're unloading the dishwasher, you generally want to be somewhat close to where you're going to be putting stuff. So having a dishwasher in the island, it's kind of annoying because then you got to walk back and forth to where those dishes are going to go.
Also, which way the refrigerator door opens up, because I think isn't it pretty easy to switch which way a refrigerator door opens?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's like one of those key things that I would be looking for in like opening up cabinet doors, right?
Mhm.
If a door is like opening up and then blocking, or if a refrigerator door is opening up and blocks a door, right? And all you have to do is switch that door and it makes it more useful. Yeah, hopefully the flipper is taking that into consideration.
Yeah, because it's such an easy thing, like, why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah.
What about so we're talking about red flags that buyers
Mhm.
should look for. Can you talk a little bit about the price difference, between, like, what the flipper bought it for and what they have it for sale for?
Yeah, I think that's really great concept because you'll see on Zillow or your listing what the prior purchaser bought it for. They
Mhm.
might have bought it for 400,000 and then it's listed for 700,000. And so you as a buyer are like thinking like, I don't know. There's a lot that goes into that. One of the things is you don't necessarily know what all went into it, right? So if they had to do the roof, the HVAC, the sewer line, right? All that stuff adds up really quick. So even though there might be a big price difference, they might have had to put a lot of work into it. As you're looking at the property and as you engage with the selling agent, right? You can ask for some of that documentation, like what all did they do? Where's the value add? What kind of stuff is there that they did that maybe isn't obvious from prior photos?
Well, and if they have a good listing agent, they will list all that out in the listing description. They'll say roof 2025, sewer line 2025. And so maybe it's just as worth a quick run through of big ticket items, because if you walk into a place and it's all brand new and shiny, we talk about cosmetic items versus mechanicals and big ticket items. Cosmetic items are the flooring, the paint, the countertops, the cabinets, these things that make it look pretty. But the big ticket items that you really care about and that you should, know are, what about these things? The roof, the furnace, the AC, the sewer lines. What am I missing?
Sewer lines. Yeah, I think those are the big
The
ones.
water heater. So all the mechanicals, the roof, and the sewer lines, I think those are some really big ticket items.
Yeah, and I'll break those down a little bit too. Roofs, I think, are getting more and more important. Insurance is playing a big role in that because they're starting to kind of question whether a 15-year-old roof is really like still good, even though it might still look good, right? Insurance is coming back and saying, hey, maybe we can't insure that, right?
There's a bunch of insurance companies that don't want to insure anything with a roof that's over 10 years old. So
Exactly.
10 years is the mark.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really key. I think the age of a roof is important for sure. HVAC, like the furnace and the AC, uh, I think the condition of it is maybe more important than the age. Like when I bought my house, my furnace was 15 years old, but it's still kicking really great. And I think it's important to kind of know that age isn't as important as well as it's functioning well. I think a good option if you don't have a new furnace or a new AC is like a home warranty, right? Because those are big items that could last a long time, and you just don't know and sometimes.
That is a tricky subject because on the subject of furnaces, I think that I want to say off the top of my head, their lifespan is like 20 to 30 years. However, getting it to the high end of the lifespan is dependent on how it was treated
Yeah.
during its life. So, somebody who's having it cleaned and serviced on a regular basis and they're changing the furnace filter out every so often, that furnace is going to last longer. But the tough part is it's really hard to know, especially if it's been flipped. So like if the flipper has done a clean and service, it's got a brand new filter in it. I have no idea what it was like before, because there are some homes that I go in and I am looking at the vents and the registers, because if I see it is all gobbed up with decades of dust and grime, you can be pretty sure that maybe they didn't change their filter for years at a time. Maybe they never had an HVAC tech come and service it. And, it's probably not in the best shape. But again, if the flipper did all that stuff, now who knows? Who knows what it was when they got in there?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And, hopefully there's documentation. I think often there probably isn't. But that's definitely something to be considering for sure. And that's kind of like a house by house kind of assessment that you would need to do.
Let's talk about this documentation. So I
Right.
think you're saying that no documentation is a big red flag, and I don't disagree with you, but at the same time, we have to live in reality. And as an active realtor, I can tell you right now, it's less than 50% of the time that I go under contract and get a whole bunch of due diligence docs from the seller,
Yeah.
whether it's a flipper or a homeowner seller. And a lot of times, even with the flippers, like maybe they have the warranties for the new appliances and they don't provide anything else. And that just really blows my mind. Like, how can you have bought this house, done all this work? I know you spent money on it. How do you not have any of the receipts? Because you're doing this as a job. You would have those receipts as business expenses at the very least. So I really, if you want to speak more about that, I just can't understand, like, why are we not seeing more documentation on these flips?
I think any good flipper should be providing some sort of warranty with that. A lot of the contractors I work with, they themselves provide a transferable warranty for a year. So I would hope that that's a part of the deal, right? And as part of any sort of project, especially if it's permitted, there should be documentation of what the stuff was changed, right? Whether the layout of a bathroom was done, whether plumbing was changed, electrical, all that stuff should be a part of that. And it's sad that it's maybe not as available. When I was talking about the furnace too, definitely like as a flipper, when I buy a house, I may not have the documentation of what that furnace condition was, right? And definitely as my service, right? I'm going to be servicing it, but then you can't tell how well it was taken care of, right? So
Mm.
that's always a gray area, unfortunately.
Well, you mentioned permits.
Yeah.
I have my own thoughts and opinions about permitting. It seems to me like I'm never going to dissuade a buyer from buying a house that there don't seem to be any permits on for work that was done, because I think it's extremely common and this is part of homeownership, right? You can do whatever you want to your house. So I think it's extremely common for sellers and homeowners to not really have stuff permitted. And they're just DIYing it, right? And also, it's my opinion that the whole permitting process is a revenue stream for the government. And I think that probably the inspectors are pretty subjective in the same way that I talk about appraisers being very subjective. The appraiser already knows what number we need before they step foot on that property. They usually give us the number we need. And so I feel like it's kind of the same with these permit inspectors coming out and looking at stuff like, how close are they really looking? Is this really, how important are permits in your opinion?
Yeah, I think maybe before I answer the permitting question, what I think is most important, getting back to the documentation and what's been done to the house, is making sure that a professional has done it, someone who's licensed and insured, right? Because if that work doesn't hold up, right, there's some sort of fallback on there, regardless of permits, right?
So let's talk about this for a second.
Sure.
So, so when I see a house that's for sale and I have an idea that it's probably been flipped, and I have access to the listing agent and I can see who owns it. I can see
Mhm.
who the seller is. But if they're not providing any due diligence docs, I don't have any information about who did all the flip work. So are you suggesting that I should probably be asking the listing agent, like, hey, if you're not gonna give me any due diligence docs, are you at least gonna give me the name and, the company that did all of this work so I can check out if they're licensed and insured?
I think that is a negotiating standpoint for sure. I don't know that every flipper, right? I can't speak for all flippers,
Mhm.
but I think as part of a service as doing that flip, right? You have to have some sort of guarantee on that. Your reputation is on it, and making sure that, someone has done it right is very important. Regardless of permits, right? Um, I think permitting is important for big ticket items, right? Any sort of replumbing that has to happen, any rewiring, electrical, especially anything that adds value or adds like an element to the house. Added square footage, a new bathroom, right? Redoing, finishing a basement that's expanding the living space. So I think those things are key because you as a owner, when you go to resell that house, can get into trouble if it's not permitted.
In
Right.
what way?
Well, just when you go to sell it, right? If you've added square footage to the house, added an addition or something, and it wasn't permitted, that can get caught up in the resale later on when after you've bought it and sold it.
I've not seen that.
Oh, good.
I'm not trying to get into an argument with
Mhm.
you about it. But I've not seen that. It seems like buyers are looking, you put it up for sale, buyers are looking at it. Maybe they want to see permits and they either see them or they don't. But either way, I don't think that that is a huge factor for whether or not they're buying the house. Now, if you're adding square footage to it and you haven't permitted it, Then we have an issue where the square footage of the house is not matching the square footage that's listed in tax records. And and then tax records are hooked up with the MLS. And so I think, I don't know this, but I think that when the tax people, the county sees the bigger square footage on the MLS listing, that's like a trigger to them, and it may trigger them to come out and check it out. Then if they update the square footage on their end, now you're going to be on the hook for higher property taxes for more square footage. But as far as adding value or having it difficult to sell or causing a difficulty during the sale, I've not run into that.
Okay, that's good. That's good to hear that part, yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
I love it. Let's see, what else do we have to want to talk about? Okay, here's a great question. So, how can a buyer tell if cosmetic work is covering up bigger issues? Because especially when we go under contract and we have our general inspector come out and inspect things, this is a conversation we're always having. Like, the inspector is only inspecting what he can see.
Yep.
So, what would be some giveaways of things that have maybe been covered up?
Yeah. I think from a flip perspective, that's a challenge, right? Because everything usually has been touched in the house. Maybe on your like lower end flips, maybe not. Some of the areas that I would always be looking for is inconsistencies. Um, Flippers are very price conscious, right? They're not as emotionally attached to a property like a homeowner might be. So when they're looking at a project, they're always trying to figure out where makes the most sense to put my money. And so if a house or like a floor in one room is really well set up already, but you need to replace the floor in another room, there might be a difference there, and they might just been like, we just need to replace this one section as opposed to the whole flooring. So I would be looking for any sort of inconsistencies. It's not necessarily bad, right? But it kind of will just kind of be a clue as to the quality. Looking at patches and walls, if it's a flip, it should be pretty nice, consistent throughout. But if there's anything that's out of alignment, with patching and walls, tiles not sitting straight, anything like that, I would be concerned more about the quality of work than like hiding things.
Mhm. So another thing that I'm often pointing out in homes when I'm in them with buyers are windows, because windows, we kind of hit on all these big ticket items earlier, and windows is another one. So when I'm walking through a house, I'm looking for them to be the white vinyl windows. And if they look metal to me, I'm pointing that out to my buyer, because it seems to me like metal windows are from a certain era that is old, and that they're going to need to plan on replacing them at some point. And definitely, like, it's not good for the energy efficiency. So what can you tell us a little bit about windows? Is that something that you're often replacing in your flips?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the expectation, especially at certain price points at 500K or more in the Denver metro area, is that the windows are replaced. I know from kind of like looking at the energy numbers and stuff, it's not really that important. I think maybe if they're single pane, but that's old. I think the utility of them is whether they open or not is maybe more important. Maybe for those lower end buyers, you don't need the new vinyl windows, but definitely something that's expected on a flip is nice, clean, functioning windows.
Yes. And the doors too, right? I've recently become aware of, apparently it's very easy to adjust doors so that they open and close properly. And this just blows my mind, because the amount of doors that I have opened and closed that are sticky, they're scraping the floor, they don't quite close. You got to shoulder it, to get it to close. Especially front doors. Oh my goodness. Me me accessing properties with the key, like, it's just a whole thing. Like, finding the lockbox, picking out which key is going to fit in which lock, and then which way it turns, because half the time they've got them installed backwards, so it turns the wrong way. And then, do you pull it towards you while you turn it? Do you push it away while you turn it? Like, how much shoulder do you have to use? Like, this whole thing is just, like, it cracks me up. It's one of those things that they don't tell you about in real estate school. Um, so I'm thinking that this door thing is another thing that we should be looking at in flips. Like, tell me, am I right? Is that an easy thing to fix?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially a flip, right? Two pieces around that I'm looking at as a flipper. The front door is like the first impression, right? So it's really key to make sure that that door opens easily, it doesn't squeak, you're not having to jimmy the key, right? So that's so important to make a nice clean door. And then just getting back to like the cabinets in the kitchen, right? Just open all the doors, right?
Mhm.
If there's a couple doors that are rubbing against the floor and it's a flip, like they're not paying attention to details. So put that in the red flag bucket, if you will.
Mhm.
Very like even the older houses, unless it's like really old house and it's just quirky, but that's definitely an easy way to tell kind of their level of quality.
Well, I feel like we've talked about the inside quite a bit. What if we talk about the outside? Because is landscaping and curb appeal, is that something that you are paying? I know as a real estate person, like we're always talking about curb appeal, and I've heard you talk about first impressions. So can you talk a little bit about what kinds of things you do around landscaping?
Yeah, landscaping is interesting. Curb appeal is obviously very important because that's that first impression, right? So making sure the yard looks clean. Oftentimes I'm pulling out like juniper bushes that have like overgrown windows and stuff. So really trying to make a good first impression when you first pull up. And this has kinda changed over the years a little bit. It used to be like the backyards would kinda just, like, leave them as is, right? Or, de-weed them or do something very simple. And then the buyers will come in and just kinda do whatever they want with the backyard. That's kind of their new space that they really create. But we're finding in the last couple of years that, like, it's also gotta be of the same quality as the front yard. Whether there's a fireplace out there, even if it's something really simple, but something that brings people outside and adds value. Normally, that wasn't something I did, but that is something that I'm doing now on a regular basis.
That's interesting because you mentioned that that has changed in the last couple of years, which means that that has changed since we moved into a buyer's market.
Yes.
And it just underscores this point that, buyers want turnkey homes. Buyers will, all day long, they will make offers and compete against each other on a home that is turnkey, that they feel like they can move right into and have zero projects. So that sounds accurate to me. Um, I think I don't know if you'd call this a red flag or not, but I've noticed this a few times recently where I've pulled up and I can see the sod lines. Like you can see grass and it's the end of February right now. So we've been in the winter time. And I'll pull up and it's like you can see where they laid brand new sod and it's all just dead. And it is such a waste and so sad, especially because if there wasn't a sprinkler system to keep it going, like, they're basically just laying it down for pictures and then letting it die. So how do you handle sod if there are you not putting sod in if there's no sprinkler system?
Yeah, that's kind of like a house by house basis. I like to, where there is sprinkler systems, definitely making sure the yard's nice. During the winter months, it's really hard though,
Mhm.
right? So, unfortunately, sometimes that's not something you can get to or do well, right? Part of, doing a flip in the winter is you want to make sure it's done right. And laying sod in December or January, maybe not the best idea.
Right.
But yeah, definitely like it's just making sure it looks good. And I think this gets back to, the quality of flipper. For me, when I'm in doing something and I've gotten something torn down, I like to make sure it makes sense to do something from a home buyer's perspective. So if I'm going to put in sod, make sure there's a solution and make sure it's watered. right?
Mhm.
Or whatever it is I'm going to do, make sure it's meeting the standards of the neighborhood. Maybe it's zero scape, but it really kind of just depends, right, on what's available there. Like it reminds me of one time I had a sewer line break, and or not break, it got clogged up, and my options were I could run the same sewer line. Sewer line went out the back of the house, around, and then all the way to the front of the house. So it was like 180 feet or something like that. Um, and I had the place torn up. So I chose to rerun the plumbing line from inside the house directly out front. So did it cost me more? Yes. But like I was in a unique position to do it right at that time. And so I took advantage of that. So that kind of gets back to the yard, right? Make sure you're putting in something that makes sense, not just pretty, not just something that's going to get the house sold, but is it going to work going forward?
Mm. Well, gosh, this is so fun because I definitely have learned a couple of things from you that are going to change. I'm always upgrading and, doing best practices and evolving my processes. So it's fun to learn a couple of new things that I'll start doing from now on. So thank you for that. And I think we've kind of wrapped it up, really, talking about this, how to tell whether it's lipstick slapped on a pig versus, a really quality job. And I hope that I have some buyers that get to buy something from you in the future because I'm really, I love the way that your thought process is around it, around doing quality work. So thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for having me. This has been a great time.
Yeah. If you like this content and want to support the channel, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go.